Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today I'm going to show you a game I didn't understand at all, which I played poorly from the beginning to the end, I can say, and I was very unhappy after the game because I realized straight away that I basically had no idea what was going on, and my plans were incorrect and my reactions to my opponent's threats were incorrect. Anyway, I'm playing the winner of the tournament, Fide master Josip Stocko, a very strong player. He started with pawn to e4 and we got into a Tal variation of the advanced Caro-Kann. So after bishop f5, h4. And you could play this with h6. There are several ways to play this, several alternatives to h5, which I played. You can play queen b6 or queen c7. You can even play c5. You can even play a6. So there are a couple of weird moves, but I went for h5, which is the principled way to play. And now c4 is the most popular move. Bishop d3, which my opponent chose, is the second most popular. Basically, exchanging the defender of my light squares, making the g4 square weaker, the f5 square weaker, my control over this diagonal weaker. I have no alternative. I have to take. So queen takes and e6. This is all sort of a forced variation. Now here he played knight f3. Bishop g5 is the move that I knew, and that's the most popular, and it's a forcing move. Knight f3 is not a forcing move, so it gives me the option to develop freely, and it gives me the option to go wrong as well. I played an okay move. I knew that queen a5 check is supposed to be played in these lines, and after knight b to d2 I'm supposed to go knight h6 for knight f5. But I wasn't really sure whether this was the exact position. These lines in the Tal Caro-Kann are, well, at least for me, very confusing. And queen a5 seems like a forcing move which helps him develop and doesn't help my cause that much. Alternatives are queen b6, after which it's hard to develop this bishop, but you can simply castle. I could have also played knight e7, which has to be okay, and after bishop to g5, pinning my knight, I can then play queen b6. With that, we would basically transpose to the main lines. But I played knight d7, which seems like a flexible move, and in the advanced Caro-Kann, knight d7 can never be that bad. Even if it's not the most precise move, knight d7 has to be okay. The only reason why you would like to keep your knight on b8 is if white plays c4, for example here, and you do something and then he takes and you take. You wish this knight was still on b8 so that it could freely go to c6. Not that this is bad because the other knight could go to c6, but I'm just saying. Okay, so here he did play bishop g5, and I played queen b6, which seemed to be the principled move. Now knight e7 is also a move. I should say that if he plays c4 instead of bishop g5, then I don't think I take straight away. I can just go. Well, I actually could take. Because in these positions, when the queen recaptures, I can have huge control over d5 and then later on some pressure on the d4 pawn. I should note though that these jumps could be very annoying into d6, so I have to be slightly careful about that, but for the moment that doesn't seem like a big threat. Anyway, after knight d7, bishop g5, queen b6. Here the move that white should play, which I was expecting, is knight b to d2, sacrificing this pawn. And this is actually a line we would have transposed to a line that I knew. So after knight b d2, black plays queen b5, white plays c4, and then black takes on b2, and after castles, queen a3. I was familiar with this, but my opponent thought for a long time and played pawn to b3. Now, one very important positional theme in these positions is what happens after c5 if the pawn is still on c2, and can white play c4 and break down your center. Now b3 I knew was a bad move because it has to be a bad move. Punishing it, the only way to punish it is to play c5. If c5 works, then b3 has been punished. If you don't play c5, then b3 has to be a good move because c4 is going to be supported by the b3 pawn. So in the event of c4, dc4 is basically not good because you give white a huge center and a ton of space. I didn't play c5, unfortunately. I thought for some time and I got scared. So for no reason at all. If I play c5, he should play c3, after which c5 is the best move. I just go knight e7, and after, for example, castles, I just go knight c6, and I did everything I wanted to do. The critical move c4 doesn't really work because I can take dc4, and that attacks the queen, so he doesn't have time to play d5 or dc5. So bc4, and now simply cd4. Again, he doesn't have time for c5 because I can take it. So for example, knight bd2, and now bishop c5. Probably this pawn is going to be lost, and the material is going to be equal, but e5 remains a weakness, and my position is okay. So c5 was the correct way to play. And when I was analyzing this position with my coach, he said, what's the way to punish b3? I said c5, but I wasn't sure. Because in many games, many training games and online games, when c5, c4 was played, I ended up losing my center and my position crumbled. So I played passively. The thing is here, if you decide to play passively, then c4 is coming at some point, and you don't really have time to meet it with c5 because then it's white's turn to play. And also, white could play c5 afterwards and have a pleasant attack on the queen side. If a white pawn is on c5, then of course b4, a4, b5 is a threat. So I had to accept that before playing my next move. I played knight e7, knowing that c4, c5, a4, a5, a4, b4, b5 could be coming. My opponent played knight b to d2. And now again, c5 was the way to go. Again, I didn't play it. Again, c4 is the critical response. If c4, then again cd4. Excuse me, in this position cd4. And if cd5, then I can simply take with the knight. If he throws in bishop e7, cd5, then ed5, my center is lost. However, I will have nice control over the e6 square, and I can basically blockade later on with my knight, for example, something like this. And I have a bind on the e6 square, which is the most important square in this position for the moment. Again, I didn't play it. I played bishop f5, which, knight f5, which is what I had planned with knight e7. But again, doesn't punish what white did with b3. So he finally played c4. Now I can play passively or I can play actively. The active move that I saw worried me slightly. I wanted to play bishop a3, which threatens bishop b2 and winning the d4 pawn. So he probably plays rook b1. And after this, I have to start breaking open the position, and the only way to do that is pawn to f6. This seemed extremely scary to me. So ef6, gf6, bishop f4. I can pin for the moment with bishop b4, castles, and now something like knight f8, knight g6, and playing with either a king on f7 or a king on c8. Hard to say which is scarier. I lost a position very similar to this one in the last round of Parachin Open this summer. So my memories of these positions aren't that pleasant. So against against pawn to c4, I again played passively with bishop to e7. He played c5, and here I missed my chance. c5 is actually not a good move, which I realized much later on when I was analyzing the position for the third time. I got this idea, and it seems to work. I checked it with an engine later, and it does work. So in the game I played queen c7, accepting this sort of minority attack with a4, b4, b5. The correct way to play is simply queen to b5. if queen to b5, white doesn't have a good move. If takes, then obviously the attack is not coming. My knight is coming back to c6. Huge pressure on d4, and eventually he's going to have to play b4 to be able to play knight b3 to defend the pawn, and he's never breaking through on the queen side because it's 2 against 2. I can just blockade everything and have a perfect position. So if not taking the queen, well, what does he do? King e2 doesn't really make sense. I can take, and then play b6, break open the position, punish c5. And if something like queen c3, then f6 actually makes a ton more sense. Fine, he can throw in a4 with tempo, queen a6, ef6, gf6, bishop f4, and now b6 again breaks open the position to my advantage. The difference here is that his king is going to be stuck in the center as well. So this was the way to play. During the game, I didn't even consider queen b5. I didn't even look at it for a second because I made the same mistake I keep making over and over again, and that's deciding on a variation early on, and then when it happens, I don't double check for different moves. Obviously, it's easier to look at a position when the moves are on the board than to visualize beforehand. So had I looked for alternatives, I definitely would have found queen b5, especially because I know queen a6 ideas when the knight is still on b8. So this is a mistake this is for me a recurring mistake, which this game highlighted once again. So I have to say, after this game, I didn't make the same mistake in the next 13 games I played, which I'm happy about. So anyway, I played queen c7, allowing this attack. And I thought it wasn't that scary. Okay, so bishop takes, knight takes castles, knight came back to f5, rook fe1. And now I always have a choice of playing b6. And this pattern is very familiar to me, and whether I should play it or not depends on what happens when the position opens up. My idea was to reinforce the f5 square so that once this knight comes either to g3 or to e3 probably, I can have a knight on e7 and then either take and bring my other knight to f5 or wait for him to take. So I played knight f8, knight g6, knight e7. That was my idea, and I ignored what he was doing. The alternative, as I said, was pawn to b6, which probably was correct. I don't know what's the correct way to play this position. This is a position that the engines really did not solve for me. The engine likes b6, but then changes its mind, and you can basically play b6 whenever you want, even if the pawns have already advanced to b5. So, and I knew that. In my mind, there was no rush to play b6. So what happens after b6? Well, b4, and now I have the option of taking, where he takes with the b pawn, or I can simply play a5. And against a5, the queen side gets liquidated after a3, a4 castles. Everything is going to be traded off. Fine, I have a weakness on c6, but after f6, e5, his center could collapse as well. And also, it's not easy to exploit the weakness on c6. For example, rook b1 and takes, and rook b8, let's say. White has to be slightly better because this weakness is more apparent than the weakness on d4, but if the rooks get traded off, then it's really hard to punish f6, and if I get in e5, as I said, everything is collapsing. Instead, I played knight f8. I wanted to play it before castles, because then I don't have to move my rook away. He played b4, I played knight g6, he played g3, defending his pawn on h4. I castled. Knight f1, the knight is coming to e3, so my plan of playing knight e7 can be played now or after the knight comes to e3. In this position, maybe, because my rooks are connected now, this idea with b6 and a5 is slightly better, so I can play a5 straight away. So here, a3 wouldn't be as good because I can take, and there is no tempo. I can play b6 straight away. And now everything actually is getting liquidated. If he exchanges rooks, my position is fine. If he takes, this is good. Pressure on b4, pressure on d4, so not easy to defend. And this should be about equal. I'm not getting an easy c5 in to liquidate my weakness, but it's going to be sort of a stalemate position on the queen side. If against a5 he plays b5 straight away, then again I can play b6. And if knight e3, knight g7, again I'm defending the f5 square. These are going to get traded off and my position is okay. But I didn't react. I still didn't react. I played knight g7. He played a4. I still didn't react. I played rook f to b8. I just wasn't scared of the attack. And even though b6 is a more elegant solution to the problem, ignoring the attack wasn't a bad idea. It's not as if he's getting anywhere. So my assessment of the position was sort of correct. But still, it would have been much easier to play after b6. He played rook ec1. And here I played queen to d7. I wanted to get my queen away from the c-file, and queen d7 is my first really useless move, I have to say. It doesn't do that much. It's sort of a waiting move to see what he does. After queen d7 he played rook a b1, so he didn't really know what to do either. Again, I should have played b6, and for example, rook a b1, bc5, rook c5, rook b7, let's say knight e3. I can ignore that, or I can just take knight e3, queen e3, maybe queen b8, putting pressure on this pawn, queen g5, just trading h5 for b4 should be okay, or I can even play g6. Let's say queen back to d2, a5, this position should be okay for me. If b5, then takes, and a4, and now I have a passed pawn. Here I should probably even be better, I don't know. So b6 was the correct way to play. I played queen d7, he played rook a b1, and now it's not that I panicked, I just thought that he doesn't have anything, so I decided to close down his options on the queen side, and I played a6. a6 is a move that's commonly played to slow down queenside attacks. That way you get to liquidate pawns. So for example, if this happens, I can play b6 here, give up a pawn temporarily, or not even give up a pawn, excuse me, and this should be okay. Yeah, give up a pawn temporarily, but I'm going to get that pawn back. But yeah, I played a6. Again, this was incorrect. I should have played b6 again. And for example, knight to d2, bc5, rook c5. Again, the same idea. I want to put pressure on b4 while he's putting pressure on h5. And again, this should have been okay. But I played a6 thinking that he doesn't have anything, which is correct. I mean, if he pushes, then he really doesn't have anything. Everything is going to get liquidated, and if there is nothing happening on the queen side, then we have to switch to the other side of the board. That's where the problem lied, actually, during the game. So immediately after a6, he switched plans. He thought for some time and played queen to d2, which I didn't even consider. I didn't even consider the immediate transfer to the king side. And now I started panicking. I got into panic mode, and obviously if I don't have pressure on b4, then queen h5 is a serious threat. And I made a mistake here. After the game, he just said that this has to be a bad move, and I said, I know. That's what he said about my next move. I played knight c8. Knight c8 has a twofold idea, neither of which works. The idea is that after queen g5 and g6, I have time for queen e7, which I don't. It's as simple as that. Because he plays g4 straight away, which again, I didn't consider seriously. I thought it cannot be that good. Let me just show you what I should have played after queen d2. After queen d2, my last chance to get counterplay is to play b5. And after b5, if a b5, then rook b5 gives me pressure on b4. After b5, if queen g5, then ba4. And again, after queen h5, I have pressure on b4. This should be more than sufficient counterplay. And after b5, if c b6, Then rook b6, again, I have pressure on b4. So for example, queen g5, rook b8, queen h5, rook b4. Again, should be more than pleasant for me, because I will be able to play c5, d4 is hanging, a4 is hanging, black should be better here. So against queen d2, I should have ignored his transfer to the king side and just played on the queen side, and I could have had equality. After knight c8, on a high level, this is a winning position for white, because this is a very useful move, a useless move. The second idea, by the way, which I forgot to mention, was to play knight a7 and b5, which again is too slow and just gets my knight away from the king. So this is even worse than thinking I could play queen e7. Okay, so queen g5, g6, g4. And after g4, I realized I'm in trouble. So I took, he played queen g4, and I played knight back to e7. Preventing h5 and hg because I can take with the knight, but he just played queen g5, and this is now getting very scary. My last chance was to play queen d8, and after knight h2, the knight wants to come into g4 to play queen f8, and then the knight comes into g4, and I can probably get away with queen g7. Knight f6 check, king h8, maybe the knight goes back to g4, and I go knight g8, trying to defend everything and to hold. It's not that this is good for black, but maybe I can get away with it. After queen g5, though, I saw a way to defend, which I was really happy about. I didn't check it and resigned. So I played king h7. He played queen f6, and I played my move instantly. Like, instantly. I played knight g8 and resigned. Why? Because of knight g5. This is a checkmate. It's mate in 1, mate in 2, actually. So my only move is king h6 and then queen h8, mate. I remember feeling as if I were struck by lightning at the board. It took me about 20 seconds to resign and to sign my score sheet. I was really shocked. I don't remember missing a mate in 2 in a tournament game ever. So king h7 is a bad idea because I don't have knight g8, obviously. I just didn't even see queen f6, knight g5. I had enough time on the clock. I had about, I want to say 45 minutes, maybe half an hour. I definitely had plenty of time to see it. So after queen f6, maybe I can play knight h6. I don't know. Maybe he continues h5. I go rook h8, trying to defend. Maybe, I don't know, knight g3, king g8. Maybe maybe I can survive, but it seems very grim. It seems like I'm not going to be surviving. So from the beginning to the end, as soon as he played b3, I knew what the correct pattern was, but I wasn't strong enough to calculate it correctly. And then after c5, I missed queen b5. I didn't even consider it. And then once I missed it, and once the attack started, I declined to play b6, breaking open the position, because I thought he doesn't have anything, which was correct. But liquidating the queen side would have made things easier. At least it would have prevented him from having a clean king side attack. And then finally, when he started transferring to the king side, I overreacted, panicked, played knight c8, which, when you look at a move like that in analysis, you think you're an idiot for playing that move, but it made a lot of sense to me during the game. Failed to get counterplay on the queen side, allowed him a free attack, and then even missed a mate. So, not a game to be proud of, but the good thing about games like this is that you can learn more from this game, or I can learn more from this one game than from 10 of my other tournament games. And that really is correct in this case. I just misplayed it. I misplayed it like from the beginning to the end. I played at least 20 suboptimal moves in a... How many moves were played? At least 20 suboptimal moves in a 27 move game. So that's... You We have to learn from that. In any case, this was my first loss. Well deserved. And I think I learned from the game a ton already. I'm going to keep analyzing it and looking at it like every other day because it's going to be useful. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.